Hanukkah linda está aquí. Ocho candelas para mí. That's a child singing. Hanukkah linda está aquí. Ocho candelas para mí. Oh, I didn't tell you. The oh is everybody. And it's a healthy American oh, huh? So let's go. Una candelica, dos candelicas, tres candelicas, cuatro candelicas, cinco candelicas, seis candelicas, siete candelicas, ocho candelas para mí. Muchas fiestas vou fazer.
Welcome to Conversations with B'nai B'rith International. I'm CEO Dan Mariaschin. We appreciate your spending some time with us today. We just heard the celebrated artist Flory Jagoda performing her beloved Hanukkah song, 8 Candles, also known as Ocho Candelicas. A singer, songwriter, guitarist, and accordionist, Jagoda devoted her life to preserving and performing the Sephardic ballads and melodies that she learned as a child. Nothing short of a legend during her life, she kept this flame alive and imparted her passion to thousands around the world. Recognized for her vital contributions to Sephardic and Jewish music, Flory Jagoda was named a 2002 National Heritage Fellow by the National Endowment for the Arts. Flory Jagoda was 97 when she passed away this past January. In today's conversation, I'll speak with members of the Trio Sefardi, longtime colleagues with whom Jagoda collaborated. Together, we'll pay tribute to the life and art of the woman who was called the nona, or grandmother, of Sephardic music. Trio Sefardi is dedicated to bringing the vibrant past into the living present and to continuing the musical traditions of those who created and sustained Sephardic song traditions over the centuries. Howard Bass is a founding member of the Trio Sefardi and was a founding member of the early Sephardic music ensemble La Rondinella. He performs programs of Renaissance music for voice and lute and was an accompanist to Flory Jagoda for many years. Tina Chancey directs Hesperus, the world-traveled early traditional music ensemble dedicated to bringing the past alive through collaborations between early music and film, theater, dance, and world music. She plays roots music from Sephardic and blues to early music and jazz standards. Susan Gaeta explores the varied traditions of Sephardic music. She studied under and performed with Flory for several years as a duo and with the Flory Jagoda Trio. She's appeared at the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts, the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, before numerous Jewish and interfaith communities, and more. Howard, Tina, Susan, glad to have you with us to honor Flory Jagoda and to share your experience with Sephardic music.
Thank you.
Well, to start off, I'd like you to speak briefly about the history of Sephardic Jewish musical styles that developed, where they were established after the Spanish Inquisition. And can you summarize what's important to understand about the music and its relationship to Ladino, a Jewish dialect that has its roots in the Spanish language, but which transformed in each Spanish-speaking country where Jews formed communities? So, Howard, let's begin with you.
Okay. There were Jews in Spain from Roman times until 1492. That's 15 centuries or so. And they lived under the rule of Muslims and Christians, and they spoke the languages that were spoken in Spain. When they were exiled in 1492, they were allowed to take only what they could carry with them. They couldn't take large possessions. They took so they took what they knew. They took their language, they took their stories, they took their songs, and their oral histories and their customs. Over time, in the subsequent centuries, they dispersed throughout the Mediterranean, first in North Africa, then farther east, along the coasts of France and Italy, to Turkey, the Balkans, and even to the Middle East. What kept them together as a culture was the language. They spoke what was usually called Judeo-Espanol, Judeo-Spanish, or commonly called these days Ladino. So the thing that links all Sephardic music today together, I would say, is the language. And I say that because the styles of the music in the different places where they settled were different. Balkan music is different from Turkish music. Turkish music is different from Middle Eastern music. Middle Eastern music differs from North African music. So it's very difficult to say that there is one kind of Sephardic music. The styles varied fairly drastically. So again, it was the language that unites these styles. The songs themselves are, most people believe that the songs that are sung these days are not all that old, perhaps 100 to 200 years old. Although it's quite possible that some of the lyrics, some of the texts are much older, perhaps going back even to the Middle Ages. But the majority of the songs that are sung and are known popularly today are rather new. And Flory Jagoda's place in that is to have not only have sung the songs that she learned from her grandmother in the former Yugoslavia, Bosnia, but also to have written songs in the style that she knew growing up. So she contributed a great many songs, almost always using Ladino, but occasionally using the Serbian or Serbo-Croatian language that she also knew as a child.
Tina, Howard has talked about the language being the kind of the common denominator in Sephardic music. What about the instruments that are used? Do they differ country to country?
Well, they do, because every time people played Sephardic music, they played it in the style of their own countries. So you'll hear people playing Sephardic music on things like this, which is a kimosh or a pontic lira, and it's played in Turkey and Greece. Or people play an accordion, or fiddle. There are people these days that play Sephardic music from an early music point of view, and we use early instruments like this rebec and viola da gamba. As a matter of fact, the picture of Flory circulating right now is with our viola da gamba colleague Heather Spence. So Howard plays both lute and guitar for Sephardic music, and electric guitar I hear a whole lot. Susan plays in a group with people with electrified instruments, so it's a real living tradition.
Susan, how did Flory learn about the musical traditions that had such a profound influence on her life?
Well, Flory grew up in the Alteratz family, which was a musical family. So if there was any event in the village, that was the family that played the music. It could be for a holiday or a life, some kind of milestone. So she learned the tradition from her nona, her grandmother, and the women in the village. The women were the ones who taught their children at home. They didn't go to the synagogue. The men went there to pray. The women taught their children Bible songs and lots of songs that told stories. So she remembers listening to a lot of music. A cappella, a lot of it was just vocal, women's vocal with some tambourine. And then her mother played the guitar. That's a more modern instrument. And I think she learned mostly a lot from her nona.
Where did she become a professional musician, Susan? Was her experience different kind of life before World War II? At what point did she either decide to or become a professional musician?
Well, I would say she started as a refugee. You know, she played on the train, her accordion. She sang where people joined with her. I think there's a professional quality to that, to have all these people singing with you. And then when she was interned in Korčula as a refugee, she was able to teach children accordion in exchange for food. She helped her family. So in some ways, there was a touch of professionalism there. And then when she came to America, she played music, all kinds of music, before she actually played Sephardic music.
And where did she begin concertizing here in America?
Yeah.
I mean, when did that begin?
You know, I know the Sephardic music happened, the very first song she wrote was Ocho Candelitas in 1978. So, but I think she did performances before that. Howard might know a little more, I'm not sure.
Well, actually, yeah, she was in 78, and then in 81, she did a public concert in Washington, right? And that was written up by the press and really promoted, and that was one of the things that started her national touring and then international touring. Yeah.
So where at what point was she discovered? It's always interesting with an artist who has had such a long and expansive career. At what point did the music publications or radio stations, perhaps in those days, or folks who were in the concert business, when did they say, "Wow, this is a talent"? Howard.
I think by the mid 1980s, the word had gotten out that she was around and was doing this tradition. I remember seeing her for the first time in the early 1980s on the National Mall, singing at the Smithsonian Folklife Festival. So if the Folklife Festival knows about you, then there's likelihood that other people are finding out. I don't remember the year of her first recording, which was called, I believe it was called Canticas, no, it was called Memories of Sarajevo. That was her first recording, and I'm pretty sure that came out in the mid 80s. So it was around that time, and certainly by the later 80s, she was touring fairly extensively, not just as a soloist, but with three of her children, her daughters, Betty and Lori, and her son Elliot. And I know that in 1992, the year of the quincentenary, she and her family went to Spain to perform. So certainly during the 80s, her reputation grew, and by the early 1990s, she had become pretty well known.
How did each of you connect to Flory? Howard.
Well, as I said, the first time I saw her was in the early 1980s. Tina and I were both members of this group called La Rondinella. We played early music, but we also played some Sephardic songs. And Flory came to one of our first concerts, which would have been in the mid to late 1980s. I can't pin that down exactly. And she came because she was so excited that somebody else in Washington, D.C. was performing Sephardic songs. And she came up to me very excited after the concert. And first she corrected me about several things that I'd said were quite accurate.
Yeah.
She offered to teach us some of her songs. And we, of course, instantly agreed to that.
Yeah.
So we learned a number of her songs, and we played some performances with her in the early 1990s. In the mid-90s, she had a small stroke, which she recovered from almost completely, but her fingers weren't as reliable, she felt, as she recovered from the stroke. And that's when she called me and asked if I would be willing to learn the accompaniments to her songs. And that really was the start of a much closer and more serious with humorous moments, many, a more serious approach to the music with her, and really beginning to feel as though I was being sort of embraced by, not just by her, but by this culture and by its music.
Susan, what about you?
Well, I met Flory. I was introduced to Sephardic music and to Flory's music through her daughter, Flory Jagoda. And there was a concert in Washington honoring Flory, and several of her students were there, and people were performing her music, and she was a guest in the audience. So her children had asked me, as a surprise for her, to come and sing her parts, her lead parts, and they would accompany me. So I met Flory, kind of being Flory, with her family, and she said, "You have got to continue doing this music." We immediately connected, and then we started, working together, playing together. But then when she became a National Heritage Fellow in 2002, the Virginia Humanities had a program called the Master Apprenticeship Program, where a master artist takes on an apprentice to pass on their music. And she chose me to do that. So we had that formal education. And then after that, we just were a duo, and then became the Flory Jagoda Trio, and toured and played together for many years.
And Tina, you were playing in La Rondinella.
I was,
what,
yes.
What is your story?
I was in New York for 10 years and played Sephardic music with the Western Wind and with some other early music groups that featured it. When I came to DC, I not only played with Rondinella, I was in the Folger Consort and Hesperus, and both of them did some Sephardic music. So Flory showed up at everybody's concert. I mean, it was wonderful. She was just so happy to have a Sephardic community. I wasn't able to play with her as much as the other two. Hesperus had a fair number of touring commitments, but enough so that I really got to know the repertoire and really enjoyed it. So when Howard asked me to join this group, it was such a joy, because it's music. No matter how I feel, after a rehearsal or performance of Sephardic music, I feel better. And how often can you say that?
Were you surprised by the depth of the Sephardic repertoire?
And
There was so much there.
And we're still finding out pieces that we've never heard. There are contemporary groups doing Sephardic music all over the world, and each one draws on, a different repertoire. So somebody will bring something in and say, "Hey, I heard this on YouTube. Listen to it. Do you want to perform it?" And it's a wonderful repertoire. And people are creating Sephardic music now. It's a living tradition.
And Howard, what about the arrangements that Flory brought to your performances? Were these worked out in a certain way, or did she just bring it all came together from what she had known, what she had played over the years? How did it work with arrangements for you?
Well, Flory was, of course, very influenced by what she heard growing up. Probably from the radio, and of course from other musicians who might have passed through the area where they lived. So some of her songs reflect tango rhythms. Other songs reflect Balkan rhythms like the 7/8 beat. But one of the things I like to emphasize about Flory's approach and the songs that we learned from her is these are really compositions in which not only is the melody and the connection to the melody and the words very carefully and artfully worked out, but she was very insistent on the arrangements that she had written. So songs that you hear by Flory, at least as she performed them and as we perform them, tend to reflect very much the way she wrote them. She had a very specific way of approaching the song and its harmonies. The harmony structure is quite simple in the European style, usually no more than 3 chords. And she makes use of intervals like the 3rd and the 6th to harmonize. There's just one other thing I wanted to add to what Tina was saying, if I may, just to back up a bit, regarding the sources of these songs, is to say that in the early 20th century, there was a lot of emphasis in many places on finding and writing down the old songs. A lot of people who would be called nowadays musicologists, ethnomusicologists, folklorists, were very concerned that a lot of this music might disappear as industrialization and urbanization grew. So one of the other sources for the songs that we do that aren't by Flory are these works that were published in the early part of the 20th century through the middle of the 20th century, some of which are now unfortunately out of print. But I've collected as much of that as I can. And typically, all you see on the page is a single line, the melody. Sometimes some people might have put chords in, but for the most part, it's just a melody. So when we approach music like that, we draw on our own backgrounds to harmonize and arrange the songs. But just to repeat, Flory's arrangements of traditional songs and of her original compositions is quite specific in the way that we perform them.
Susan, from your perspective, what made Flory's musical production so special and radiant? Did it stem from her expertise or from something deeper than that? Perhaps her love of family, Judaism, from where she came. I mean, I know in watching her as a person, there was talk about the word radiant, there was a glow to Flory Jagoda. And that, together with the music, made it all work so well. But from your perspective, what was it that made it so special?
Yes, Flory was such a light. I mean, when people would say when they would meet Flory Jagoda that she would treat them like they were the most important person in the world, and she was like that with everybody. I think she had a tremendous love of her family, and her music was a lifeline. She says her music saved her life. I think her music was her lifeline to her family, even in memory, for all the years after she lost them. Howard once said it was like oxygen for Flory, just to play music and sing music and share it with people. She would teach anybody who wanted to learn a Sephardic song. You could go to her house. Anyone who wanted to record her song, they would ask permission, and she'd say, of course. She was so thrilled that people were singing and performing her music. I think she had a very close connection with her nona. She wrote a very important song called Recordedus, which is memories of her nona. And we're actually about to complete a CD that's called Recordedus, which is remembering Flory Jagoda. So much of it has to do with the memory in the past and celebrating the culture that has been virtually lost. There are no Jews in Vlasenice where she grew up. It's preserved. I think it's continuing was her most important word to us. We have to continue. She was just pure love and heart. She brought her heart and her soul to her music. And there's a famous line that her grandmother said that she always said, if you can't put soul into your music, don't bother singing. So this connection she had and the way she shared it with other people and how we were able to feel that was, I think, extremely unique and very, very special. And she touched so many people. Like you said, when you heard her, it just brings a smile to your face. That joy gets transmitted, and the celebration of the life, not the tragedy. She did write songs about the tragedy, but she really celebrated the life of her family and culture through her music. So it was a celebration.
Tina, what's the most memorable thought that you have about Flory's artistry?
My favorite part of what Flory did, the way she communicated, was when we did Ocho Candelicas, because she used that as an occasion to badger the audience in a most delightful way. And there's one place where everyone sings, oh, and I just remember that being drawn out, and then she would stop and say, no, that's not enough, and she would make you sing more and stuff. And it was, I mean, of course, that is, there's no comparison between that and the beautiful thing she did as singing, but that's my favorite moment of communication with the audience.
How about you, Howard?
Well, I had the honor and pleasure of sitting next to Flory at a great many concerts in front of all sorts of audiences in a lot of different settings. And I was always just so struck by the way she could draw her audience into the world that she came from. She could literally create that world for the audience with her stories and with the songs, and take people out of late 20th, early 21st century life and issues and problems, and just sort of wrap her arms around the audience and draw them in. It was really always very remarkable. So that to me is something that I think I saw that in every concert we ever gave.
Well, with that, let's hear another song by Flory. This one is called Oildo Minovia, and it's from a concert you did with Flory in 2007 at the Library of Congress, presented by the American Folklife Center's Homegrown series. Let's have a listen.
This one is Oildo Minovia, Listen to Me, Bride, which her family is giving her advice. When you meet il suegro, the father-in-law, kiss his hand and call him my new father. The same thing with the mother-in-law, la suocera, la suegra. When you kiss her hand and call her my mother. And so on would go through the whole family. Actually, it is a dance, but we will make it just as lively, and somebody could get up, but there's no room. I would say get up and dance. It is an old Balkan rhythm, 7/8 beat for the folk dancers. They know what they are. So let's go. Oildo Minovia, metterlo etino, que yo ajeno, quiere ser bien servido, quiere ser bien servido. Cuando viaje mi novia a vuestro suegro, besan de la mano y llamando Padre Nuevo, llamando Padre Nuevo. Cuando viaje mi novia a vuestra suegra, besan de la mano, llamando Madre Nueva, llamando Madre Nueva.
Wow, to listen to that and to hear her play is just truly incredible. Now to all of you, I know that you've had some great experiences with her. We'd love to hear about the concert tour you made with Flory in celebration of her return to Sarajevo, where she was born. What did you see and hear, and how did the audiences react to Flory's songs and her playing, and to Flory herself? Howard.
I was going to pass this along to Susan, but I'll start. We
Each of you.
It was a very emotional tour for all of us. To actually go to the street where Flory was born, although it seems like that the house was no longer standing, the building, but to go, not just to be in Sarajevo, but to also go with her to Vlasenica, the village where her family, her large extended Alterock family, her mother's family lived, and were massacred during World War II. To go to the unveiling of a commemorative stone that was set in the hillside above the area where they'd been slaughtered, and to perform the music for an audience that welcomed her like a conquering hero. It was really extraordinary. We got to see how Flory drew on these roots, both the tragedy and the joy of having the background in this world that was completely unknown to I think to me and Susan. The audiences were enthusiastic, large. Our major concert was held in a room that, I don't know, maybe held a few hundred people, Susan. I can't remember exactly, but I know they had to open the windows, and lots of people were apparently crowded outside listening to this concert. So the reception was extraordinary, and the emotions that it brought to all of us were ones we'll never forget.
No, it's interesting to hear you say that, because if I recall correctly, the Jewish population in Sarajevo before the war may have been as high as about 25% of the city. And of course, there's that great Jewish tradition, the Sarajevo Haggadah. There's so much that of culture, music, of course, great history, great figures in Jewish history who came out of Sarajevo. Susan, your memories of that?
Well, Flory was like a rock star in Sarajevo, and people were. It was fun to accompany her, because musicians would come to her, other musicians, not Jewish musicians, people who played her music, and yeah, when the people were hanging out of the windows and crowding at that concert, it was pretty phenomenal. So she has such a connection there between growing up there, but also the Jewish community, the small Jewish community. We were at the Jewish Center there. We did a program there. It was just fascinating to be there and to see where she came from. I mean, we stood at her nona's house in the backyard and walked the path that her whole family walked to their deaths. And then there's this little tree that grew up in the middle of the ravine. It was pretty profound to accompany her also on that kind of a journey. So it was a combination of sorrow, but a lot of celebration and joy. People really received her so well. There were posters everywhere. Yeah, I mean, I felt like a rock star too, just accompanying her. Great.
Tina, what about you?
I wasn't there. I wish I had been.
Howard, you were going to say something?
I was going to say Susan is a rock star.
Thanks, Howard.
But you know, Dan, you're right about how Sarajevo and that all of what the Jews of the area typically call the former Yugoslavia. There were, I think, something like 90,000 Jews living in the former Yugoslavia before World War II. And I believe that the number is now around 5,000. So the culture that was there for so many centuries, 5 centuries, has almost completely disappeared. And while we did go to a Jewish community center and walked through a beautiful synagogue, beautifully decorated, but there's very little of that culture alive. But like a lot of cultures that have been largely destroyed, it does seem as though there is a kind of movement to remember and to find ways to continue. Susan mentioned we met a couple of young non-Jewish musicians who just were in love with Flory and her music, and they sang her music and played her music very, very beautifully, very soulfully. So even though the Jewish community has largely disappeared, the memory, shall we say, lingers on, and Flory's presence in the world, telling the stories, both there and, of course, in the United States and many other places she visited, does keep that flame alive.
Well, as Trio Sefardi, you've designed and produced your own programs that focus on Flory's life and legacy. Can you tell us about them, and do you have any special projects in the works, recordings, concerts? Tell us about that.
Well, besides the recording that Susan mentioned, that will basically celebrate Flory's music, I put together a program called La Nona Canta, which means the grandmother sings. And this is a program that we designed to make it multimedia. So what we've got are interviews of Flory, which were done in a wonderful documentary called Flory's Flame. And they let us borrow some of those interviews, so we'd have Flory's presence in the performance. And there are also maps to clarify where she went on her travels. There's some animations to basically give an artistic tone to the feelings that come out during this. And we complement that by performing ourselves live. So it's an interesting show. It has videos, it has live performances of Flory's music, and basically we tell the story of one particular time in her life. We focus on the time that she was escaping by herself as a teenager. Her parents said, go to the train, because she had false papers, go to the train and just play your accordion. Don't talk, but just sing and play. And so for the whole time that it took her to get out of the former Yugoslavia, she played and sang. And it's a beautiful, dramatic moment. And so we basically, we not exactly act out, but we basically inhabit that moment with her, and then talk a little about what happened in the after she came to the States, because of course people wanted to know how did she start singing, and so it's a lovely program. It's about an hour, and actually we're performing it fairly soon, though Howard knows more about that than I do.
Yes, so La Nona Canta will be part of Limud North America's E-Festival, which is coming up on Sunday, March 21st. So if anyone's seeing this before the 21st, go to Limud, LIMMUDNA.org, and it's a full afternoon of presentations by all sorts of people talking about Jewish culture and history and customs. And at 4:00 in that afternoon, we will be performing this show, La Nona Canta, The Remarkable Life of Flory Jagoda.
Well, it's so good to hear that you're doing this. And, I see this as, of course, a tribute to Flory Jagoda. But even more than that, it's also part of Holocaust remembrance. It's part of perpetuating Jewish history, a part of history that many Jews in the diaspora outside of Europe or outside of Eastern Europe and the Balkans may not be familiar with. So we're pleased that you're going to continue on in this way. Well, we're fortunate to have three accomplished performers and experts in Sephardic style with us. And as promised, our three guests have volunteered to play something to demonstrate how the instruments and squeeze boxes they use are integral to the unique sound of Sephardic folk music. So Howard, Tina, and Susan, take it away.
Thanks. I'll start. And because Zoom technology is not ideal for us three to play together, we'll each do something separately. I play guitar and lute. Flory always insisted that I use the guitar when playing her music because she thought the lute was, she would put it, too pretty. Now, exactly what she meant by that, I'm not sure. You can be the judge, but I'm going to play a few, a little medley of 3 tunes on the lute. The lute is a direct ancestor of the oud. The oud is still used, it's been played for centuries in the Middle East, in Turkey, sometimes in Greece, in North Africa. The lute that I'm playing is really the European version. The Europeans adapted it during the Middle Ages and changed some ideas about the playing and about the way the instrument was constructed. So without going too far into that particular history, I'm going to play 3 tunes. These are not Flory tunes. We are dedicated to playing Flory's music, but we also have used this group as a vehicle for exploring Sephardic music from other sources. So I'll play 3 tunes. The first one is from Edirne, which is in the northwestern corner of Turkey on the European side, formerly known as Adrianopolis. And this tune is called Traen La Nina. The second tune comes from Izmir, formerly known as Smyrna, on the western coast of Turkey, which was another major center of Jewish life, specifically Sephardic Jewish life for quite a long time. And in fact, there are still about 10,000 Jews living in Izmir. And the third tune, which is called Morikos, or we call it Morikos, comes from Salonika. Salonika, or now known as Thessaloniki, was another major center of Sephardic Jewish culture up until World War II. And so 3 tunes played on the lute.
Thank you, Howard. Tina.
Sure. I have two instruments I'd like to show you. This is a rebec. I've showed you a few before, actually, the same things. I play viola da gamba as well as a Renaissance violin in the group, but these are cooler shapes, actually. This is a rebec which was used both in medieval Europe and in the East. Three strings, and the back is round, so you can't hold it like this. You basically have to uh, stick it here and hope for the best. By the way, I noticed that my picture's not made bigger. People might want to do that so they can see this a little better, right? The strings are made out of sheep gut. Sheep gut sounds just a little different than modern gut, and this bow is, I call it a dance bow because it's used on my Renaissance fiddle with black horsehair. So gut is one of those things that changes with temperature and humidity, so it's lots of fun to have as your strings, but it gives you a particular sound. This is part of a piece called Una Matica. So it's quiet, but it's remarkable how you can really fill up a room with this. And so the other instrument I wanted to show you now is a little bit more about this instrument, the Pontic lira, or the lira pontica. And the Pontic lira, let me see if I can do this. Nope. And the Pontic lira is a wonderful instrument. It sounds like it has a cough. It sounds like it has a bad cold and it's kind of hoarse. The tromba marina is a medieval instrument with a bridge that rocks, and sometimes the bridge rocks here too when you get things started. So I love this instrument. It's just such pure expression. And I'm going to do this so you can see. And I'd like to play just a little of a tune called Angelica Baila, which means Rachel dances.
Thank you, Tina. And Susan, what do you have for us?
Well, I have a song that Flory wrote for the upcoming holiday of Pesach. I just wanted to say one thing about another project I'd just like to briefly mention. As a master artist with Virginia Humanities, my mission is to teach and preserve Flory's music and stories. I have just recently finished with an apprenticeship of my own. I have an apprentice, Gina Sobel, and it's the continuation. So I've completed a program called Sing Her Songs, which are 10 teaching videos. For anybody who wants to learn how to play some of Flory's music, we have sheet music and guitar chords and some clips of Flory's kind of original sound, and then me playing the piece. So anyone who wants to learn Flory's music may be able to do so through the Sing Her Songs program. It's called Sing Her Songs, Sharing Flory Jagoda's Music in Your Community, and it is on my website, susangaeta.com. So I invite anyone who wants to learn how to play some of these songs and teach them and share them to look at that. So the song I'm going to sing is called Pesach a la mano. Flory wrote it about Pesach, and she would always say that you could tell in the village of Lasanitsa who all the Jewish families were, because before Pesach, before Passover, all of the furniture would be out on the street. And the rabbi would come to do like this check. And they would share the food that they were no longer going to have, their chametz, with their Muslim and Christian neighbors. And the chorus is, it starts with Purim lano, Purim is over, Pesach ala mano, Pesach is coming. But she would often say that the women in the village, the Jewish women, would not say it that way with a smile. They would say, Purim lano, Pesach ala mano, because it was so much work. As you know, if anyone who celebrates Passover knows that it takes a lot of preparation. It says, Il Dio bendichomos da mazal, that God will bless us and bring us luck. Y el Señor Rubi, the rabbi, says, no comer el pan 8 días, do not eat bread for 8 days. He tells the tías. Okay. Purim, Purim lano, Pesach, Pesach a la mano, las matzah se están faziendo, los yaprak que se están cociendo, aman, 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 el Dios bendito nos da mazal, aman, 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 el Dios bendito nos da mazal. Purim, Purim, Purim lano, Pesach, Pesach a la mano, la nona está diciendo a los nietos a limpiar el pueblo, cantones y los techos. Aman, 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 el Dios bendito nos da mazal. Aman, 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 el Dios bendito nos da mazal. Purim, Purim, Purim lano, Pesach, Pesach a la mano. Señor Rubi dijo a las tías, no comer el pan 8 días. Aman, 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 el Dios bendito nos da mazal. Aman, 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 el Dios bendito nos da mazal. Aman, 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 el Dios bendito nos da mazal. Aman, 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 el Dios bendito nos da mazal.
Wow, thank you, Susan. Well, Howard, Tina, Susan, we deeply appreciate your joining us and bringing both Flory Jagoda's memory and more than 600 years of Sephardic music to life. May Flory's memory always be for a blessing. Thanks to you all.
Thank you.
You.
Well, thank you to the Trio Sefardi for joining me. Thank you for tuning into this conversation with B'nai B'rith. Well, if you enjoyed this interview, make sure you never miss a program by subscribing to the B'nai B'rith YouTube channel, liking us on Facebook, and following us on Twitter. And be sure to visit our website, bnaibrith.org, to learn more about our important work. See you again soon. Take care.